a skiffle group which was mainly made up of school friends, and it wasn't very good, to be honest, but we just enjoyed ourselves. Bruce was also in a skiffle group, which was a much more professional outfit, commercially orientated, earning money, that sort of stuff.
Both at school, I have to say, this is.
Yeah, and we met because Bruce had brought a guitar to school, a National Steel, Bruce, which intrigued me tremendously. Just the fact there was a guitar at school, but this metal-bodied guitar. And once we sort of expressed a mutual interest in music, and I found out that Bruce had this group, and then I was invited to join the group. They needed someone who could play sort of lead guitar and another singer for harmonies and things. So that's what happened. Then we started doing little clubs, didn't we? Working men's clubs, go as you pleasers, which is a kind of talent competition. In other words, you turn up, do what you want, 5-minute spot, and the audience votes. And if you win, you get like a £5, a second gets £3 or something for £2, whatever. And we did that sort of work, still supposed to be at school doing homework, but in fact we weren't doing homework, we were gigging.
Hank's group was the Crescent City.
Crescent City, yes.
Crescent City Skiffle Group, and the group I was in was the Railroader Skiffle Group. And we'd seen an advert for a talent competition in London somehow, which was at the Granada Edmonton, and the first week of April the 6th of 1958. And you and I were 16, weren't we?
Yeah.
I think a Malaysian opera singer won. And a trad band came second, and the Railroaders, I think, we came third. And funny enough, on that particular day, there was a group playing called The Velvets, and Brian Bennett was the drummer on The Velvets, and he had a great sound on his snare drum. I think he had a duster or something.
Yeah.
And we remembered him from that day. Anyway, the two other guys in the band, so we lost the competition. The two other guys in the band said we're going home. And I think they did the next day. Or...
Yeah, they went back to...
And Hank and I decided to stay in London. But the Two Eyes, I guess, became famous in '56, really, with Tommy Steele. That's when I first heard of it. Tommy Steele had allegedly been discovered singing in this coffee bar. And, the great story about Tommy was that he was a seaman, he was on leave on the merchant ships, and he was singing down this little coffee bar, and a guy came up to him and said, "I've got to make you a star, son." He said, "Well, you've got 2 weeks because I'm back on the boats in 2 weeks' time." And anyway, a bit of folklore, and Tommy was, and that's when I first heard of it, and it became like a place for, I guess you'd call it wannabes now. I want to be a star.
Yeah, sort of mecca.
And it was only like a cavern, like the Cavern, I suppose, small coffee bar. Frothy coffee, the old Italian coffee, which we hadn't seen in Newcastle.
No.
It was the place. We met so many people. People would get up and jam, can I get up and do a couple of numbers with you? We were the Geordie boys, And it was there that we got to know Brian Bennett, and Tony Meehan got up with us, Jet Harris. Licorice Locking was down there. It was a mecca for would-be musos,
Yeah. We used to play down there. Probably 5-6 nights a week, and one night when we weren't playing, I actually was ill, I had cold or something, and Bruce was down there working, and he came back and told me that he'd seen this group down there with she's a great singer, looks a bit like Elvis, she's dark, good looking kid, sounds good,
Yeah.
We didn't know who it was, and it was only later on that maybe 2 months later, we found out it was Cliff. I was hanging around one day at the Two Eyes with a guy called Rick Richards, who was a country and western singer. We were just chatting, and this guy came in, a guy called John Foster, who was Cliff's first manager. So Rick said, "Why don't you have a listen to Hank?" And I was a little bit embarrassed about the whole thing. And Rick said, "Come on, let's get the guitars out." So fortunately, we had our guitars downstairs in the cellar. Went downstairs, and Rick sang a few things, a few Elvis songs, and a couple of Buddy Hollies, and I played guitar. And John said, "That's great, if you want the job, you've got it." It was just a 2-week tour. So I said, "Do you need a rhythm guitarist?" He said, "Well, yeah, we do actually." And so I recommended Bruce. And then John said, "Well, look, we're going to have a rehearsal in a couple of days' time at Cliff's parents' place. So we'll meet here at the Two Eyes on whatever day it was." And that was it. A couple of days later, we met Cliff, actually at the tailor's, just along from the Two Eyes, there was a tailor shop, and Cliff was being fitted for this famous pink jacket, which looked great, and it was quite outrageous at the time. And that's when we first met.
We just had spots, didn't we?
Yeah, we all had spots. I mean, we're just an acne team, you know.
Pinball kids.
The first rehearsals we did with Cliff were in his parents' front room in Cheshunt. There was Bruce, Cliff, Terry Smart, a school friend of Cliff's on drums, Ian Sandwell, who wrote Move It and a few of other Cliff's other early hits, on bass guitar, myself, and we just practiced in the front room. I think it was only doing 5 numbers or something. I think it was an initial period of suspicion, you know, eyeing each other up and down, you know, who does he think he is, and this sort of stuff. But we got into conversation on the bus. We found out we had a similar sense of humour. We liked the Goons and other things. Bridget Bardot, Marilyn Monroe came to mind, you know, etc., and male film stars that we perhaps admired. So we very quickly found that we had quite a lot in common, plus music, of course, that was the important thing. We were on the same wavelength musically. And that was it. And we were off, and very quickly, during that tour, we struck up a good friendship and became more like a band rather than a singer and backing musicians. And that's really the way it was for most of the time we were together.
Mm. We shared a flat in Marylebone High Street,
yeah.
12 guineas a week. Cliff, Hank and myself, 4 quid each. Yeah. And it was a big flat. It was like, I don't know, 4 beds, 3 baths, that sort of, you know, big. And big enough to rehearse in the front room, or look as though we're rehearsing. He's got a drum kit there, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Behind you.
Well, yeah.
Very central.
At least a snare drum and a hi-hat, I think, yeah.
And it must have been early 50s.
And that was before Cliff got his back straightened.
Was Cliff Richard and the Drifters?
That's right.
For about 6 months, I guess?
Well, yeah, until summer of 59.
Yeah.
And what had happened was Cliff's records were being released in America. Cliff Richard and the Drifters, no, you can't do it. The American Drifters, unreasonably, you know, here we were for 5 minutes called the Drifters. They'd only had the name for 25 years. And we came up with names like the Four Jets and things like this. And in fact, I believe there's a record put out.
There is.
Under America, the Four Jets, which was us. And Jet Harris and myself were on our motor scooters in Riceland. Lido, was it Lido, what do you call it?
Lido, man.
Lido?
Hey, Lido.
Where I come from, Newcastle, it's a Lido. And we were having a lager and lime, big drinkers. And Jet suddenly came, we were talking about the name, and he suddenly came up with this concept of the Shadows. And we thought, that sounds good. It's quite evocative of the situation, Cliff, we're behind him, but also slightly mysterious. So we went back and told the guys, they all liked it, Cliff liked it, told our record producer, he liked it. And that was it. We used to sing, Bruce and I, in harmonies, a bit sort of in the Everly Brothers style, I suppose, and singing with Cliff. And Cliff had heard us sing a few songs. In fact, it got the stage on his shows. Remember, the production got better to the extent that he would do
a second jacket.
Exactly, he'd do a few numbers, we'd sing a song, and he'd go off and come out with a different colour jacket. And I'd say, this is big stuff. And he said, look, you guys should be recording, you know, writing this stuff and singing. So he spoke to Norrie and said, I think you should give them an audition.
Norrie Paramore was already a famous band leader. He was a pianist to start with, in Harry Gould's Pieces of Eight. So he was a pianist. Now, I'm trying to figure out how old Norrie would have been when we were 16, 17.
Late 30s, probably.
Yeah, all the way to 40.
Maybe early 40s.
So he felt like your dad. He felt like a much older man.
We went to the office in Castle Street, was it? Castle Street, in my office. Took guitars, amplifiers and a drum kit in this office. Norrie sat behind the desk. We set up.
And played.
And we played.
Can you imagine doing it now?
A few songs and sang, and he said, you've got yourselves a recording contract.
Yeah.
But the good thing, as Bruce was saying about Norrie, was that I think he didn't completely understand what was going on with us. He knew it had an appeal. It was very simple, probably from his standpoint, musically. And he didn't interfere too much. We'd go away, work it out, arrange it, come back, play it. And as long as we recorded 3 sides in a session, and he was happy as Larry. I think that was
happy as Norrie.
Happy as Norrie. He was very shrewd, I think, in that sense, and think, well, hey, I don't completely understand this, but it works. Don't fix it. Feeling fine, stole a kiss. Feeling fine, a pretty miss. Gave it back, and so I'm feeling fine. And so on. Very fast, very frenetic.
See why I didn't make it, eh?
Yeah. We did it on the old boy show, I think, didn't we?
Yeah, oh boy, yeah.
And
Wiggling our legs.
nothing happened to it, you know. It didn't get much promotion, didn't go. The next one was an instrumental called Driftin', and actually it was Jet Black was the A-side.
Yeah.
That Jet Harris wrote.
And Drifting, which
I wrote, yeah. They were both very derivative of sort of Dwayne Eddy type things, you know.
And then Saturday Dance was the third single, vocal group, which Hank wrote. And Saturday Dance nearly made it. It nearly made the top 30, I think, in those days. So that'd still be late 59.
Yeah. And then that gave us a lot of confidence, I think, that encouragement that it was almost a hit.
Also the first single with the Strat-on.
Yeah.
Cliff and ourselves and Hank, we were really into America, you know, Buddy Holly and the Blue Cat, Gene Vincent and Ricky Nelson especially, his guitar player. And obviously they played America. Their records sounded great, and the solo and the lead guitars always sounded great. And we didn't know his name at the time, we loved Ricky Nelson's guitarist, who is now James Burton, of course, or was then as well.
Yeah.
And we'd seen Buddy Holly, we'd seen the photograph of Buddy with this guitar that looked like a spaceship, you know, we just didn't know what it was. And so Cliff, big star, he said, he sent to America, to California, to the Fender factory. We found out it was a Fender, for the brochure. And the brochure came back, you know. I always love, Mark Knopfler says, he saw the brochure as well. He can remember the smell of the brochure. It was just, you know, because it was that important in those days. And we were flicking through, you know, we went through the little brochure, and there was a Broadway order, it wasn't a Telecaster, and then it came to the centre page, and there was this pink Stratocaster with a maple neck with gold-plated hardware, you know. Wow. And to cut a long story short, Cliff bought it. He imported this guitar, Fender Stratocaster, for Hank to play.
Yeah, the funny thing was, and it worked out really well, that first of all, this guitar, this Strat, we could see it was the same shape as the one Buddy Holly had, so we thought, well, that's the same one. And surely James Burton uses the same guitar, because it's the most expensive one in the range. So anyway, when this thing arrived with this tremolo arm on, it had the heaviest strings you could imagine on there. You couldn't bend them, they're like horses, you know, steel horses. And I thought, particularly James Burton used to bend around a lot, great stuff. And I genuinely thought that it must be the American diet, you know, with all this steak and eggs and milk. These guys must have incredibly powerful fingers, you see, they didn't bend these strings. And I genuinely believed that, because none of us had heard of light gauge strings in those days. They didn't exist in the UK. So, and it wasn't until, I don't know, a couple of years later we found out that, in fact, he didn't use a Strat anyway, he used a Telly with extremely light strings on. But I'm glad in a way that we got the Stratocaster, because from my standpoint, that was a huge component in developing the style. The tremolo on, and developing the sort of vibrato using that, because you couldn't do it in the heavy strings, and no one was doing vibratos then anyway.
This guitar was 140 guineas. 140 guineas. A bargain.
At 1959, Bruce, in Leeds, doing a week in variety at Leeds, and we were sitting down after a show considering how we could improve the presentation.
Yeah.
And coincidentally, Bruce, myself, and Cliff, unbeknown to us, had gone to see Jerry Lee Lewis in the Savoy Build-Up, I think it was, with a backing, not his backing band, a support band called the Treniers, black band, Fender bass, sax player, keyboard, couple of vocalists. And the interesting thing was that this R&B band used to do all these great movements together. And we got to think about that and thought, well, why can't we do something like that? So, okay, and we were putting a new number in that week. It was called Willie and the Hand Jive. And Cliff was on the centre mic. We'd come either side, do the little interjections and the harmonies, and then the harmonies, and then came the solo, and we worked this routine out where we all walked back in unison and started walking sort of diagonally, a kick, back, front, kick, etc. during the solo.
The Tiller Girls.
then I tell you what, we worked this thing out, and it was quite difficult to play and do all this at once, but we stuck it in the show, and it brought the house down. And we thought, hey, this has got to be the direction. So we gradually added more and more stuff to it.
Obviously, Cliff had all the adulation. He was the star, if you like. We were just having so much fun, weren't we? The concerts were a riot. We used to purposely make him wiggle his legs a bit more so we could have a riot, Yeah. And he was doing all that, and you couldn't hear him anyway. It was like, this is years before Beatlemania. It was Cliff mania or Tommy Steele mania before that. The girls just screamed, and we used to wiggle our legs, and I used to lay on my back during a solo and play rhythm on, and then I'd say to Hank, "Can you play rhythm while I get up?" I couldn't get up and play rhythm at the same time. Yeah. Ridiculous.
It was a pretty chaotic sort of presentation through that period. Wasn't it? Every man for himself. If there was a piano there, you'd climb on it, and Jet Harris would move to the front of the stage and glare at all the guys and look for things like that. It was a very weird thing. But I think one thing that helped us, certainly probably from 59 onwards, was that we had older people around us, like Sid Morris, from the Grades organisation, who were then Cliff's agent. Very experienced tour manager, worked with a lot of big names, both British and American, and therefore not impressed by a few guys who've got girls screaming at them. And people like that around you are very good for keeping you on your feet. I remember Bruce one time saying to David Bryce, you remember you said, "Listen, man, I'm a star." And David said, "Well, twinkle, twinkle."
Yeah, I was 17 then.
Yeah, and it's great, you see, because that kind of... And then in 1960, we got a manager for the Shads. So as things moved forward, we always had people around us who were older, more experienced, and kept us really
on the
floor.
Yeah.
Jerry Lorden.
We met Jerry on this tour in April of 1960.
He came up to Jet and myself after one show and said, are you guys going to do any more recordings? And we said, well, yes, we're due to record when we finish this tour. He said, what are you going to do, instrumentals or vocals? We said, well, we don't really know. We're going to try to write something. Doesn't really matter, whatever comes easiest. And he said, well, can I play you an instrumental that I've written? And we said, yeah. And he, out of a small bag, he produced this little ukulele. And he went jing diddling jing 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 diddling diddling dang 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 diddling, and so on.
And he said no,
enthralled with his piece. And we thought, this is very classy, simple but classy instrumental. Yeah. So we got Bruce and Tony, listened to it, yeah, played it to Norrie Paramore, he loved it. We arranged it before we did that, because there was no arrangement, it's just a straight tune.
Norrie had already earmarked our next single, which was the old Army song.
Quartermasters.
I'm not sure whether it's Quartermasters. It is Quartermasters.
We called it, I thought we called it Quatermasters at the time.
Yeah, but it was Quartermasters, as in the army.
Yeah.
And so we took it to Norrie and he said, okay, but I want you to do Quartermaster Stores. And we recorded both the tunes, and of course Apache was quite unique then with the echo box and all that stuff. It was just a great melody. And Norrie was quite keen on Quartermaster Stores being the A-side. And we sort of said, oh. And we'd heard this story that Norrie, when he made Move It with Cliff, Schoolboy Crush was going to be the A-side. And Move It was obviously fantastic. And Norrie said, he said this to Cliff, he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll take it home to my daughters and play it to them. And the daughters chose Move It. And he said the same thing with us. He said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll take it home and play it to my girls. And the girls chose Apache. And he said, okay.
Thank goodness. Obviously we had the number one. Lots of people in those days did pantomimes. It was quite common. We did Cliff and the Shads in 1959. 60 did 3 weeks in pantomime in Stockton and Hull. Yours did 2 weeks in Stockton and a week in Hull. We did it ourselves in 1961, I think, end of 61, same thing. And the only other pantomimes we did were the ones at the Palladium. We wrote the music for 3.
And appeared in 2.
The first one, Cliff and ourselves were in, which was Aladdin. Then Frank Ifield did Babes in the Wood. We wrote the music for that, all original music. Then we did the third in the series, which was, what? Cinderella.
Yeah. The Palladium was the most famous theatre in the world, and probably still is. And we would do 16 weeks at a stretch here, but more important, we wrote the scores. So in 1964 and 66 and 65 for Frank Ifield, that was a big deal to do that.
We were able to write songs for the movies, and we had hits from the movies. So, you know, from that standpoint, it was good business. But also from the public's standpoint, we became more enormous in their eyes, in the sense we're now film stars. You're not really a film star, of course, but you're in movies. And it takes you in another dimension, if you like. So I think it was a good move. Cliff had hits, obviously, from things like Espresso Bongo. He had hits from that. Shrine on the Second Floor, I think, wasn't it?
Voice in the Wilderness?
Yeah, Voice in the Wilderness. So we didn't have anything. We just had one instrumental in there, but that was just part of an EP package, a thing called Chinchilla, I think, that Norrie Paramore wrote, funny enough. And in the young ones, we wrote some songs for that, and of course we had the hit with The Savage, which again Norrie wrote.
Peace Pipe is from the same thing.
Yeah, and Cliff obviously had the hit with the young ones, and we wrote a song called We Say Yeah, which became a big sort of stage favourite at the time. The Summer Holiday, Bruce and Brian wrote the title song, Summer Holiday. We had Foot Tapper, which we wrote for that movie, it was a number one for us.
Yeah.
And a few other little bits and pieces in the movie that we wrote. So, you know, all together it worked pretty well. And then we had a movie called Wonderful Life. And what did we have from that? I'm trying to think. We had
On the Beach.
On the Beach, yeah, that was a hit from that. And,
On the Beach.
And then Finders Keepers. We got an Ivan Novello Award for a song called Time Drags By that we did as an ensemble song with Cliff, obviously taking lead, but lots of harmonies. And on that song, when we recorded, here's a little bit of info. When we did this song, we felt it needed a kind of bluesy harmonica, and we asked our engineer if he knew of anyone who could come in at short notice to Abbey Road, and he rang around, and this guy, we knew him by the way, turned up with a bag full of harmonicas, and this guy's normally known as a guitarist, but he played great harmonica, and this guy called Jimmy Page.
He's done quite well since.
He's done well, yeah.
You know, you talk about 1963, this is nearly 5 years we'd been going before the Beatles arrived.
I don't know about you, Bruce, but I always felt that the bubble at some point would burst instrumentally, particularly with singles. It usually does for any artist, and I know there are some notable exceptions who've just continued to have hit after hit. So when that came on the scene, I found it exciting, the music they were making and the sound they were making. I liked the quality of the songs, the rawness of the production, and because I felt that pop music was getting very sweet. It was following the American movement, and we were doing it really ourselves. And the hardness that used to be in our music was beginning to drift away, if it hadn't already. So they came along with this new hardness, getting back to the roots of rock and roll. Exciting. But funny enough, that year, Bruce, was one of our biggest years for single sales. Elvis was the biggest record seller in the world that year. No, Cliff was, sorry, Cliff. Elvis second and we were third. Yeah. That was pretty good. So we had 2 number ones or 3 number ones that year, number twos, a couple of number twos. Big year and big album and everything. So, but we could see the writing on the wall that this new trend was going to get bigger. And it did, didn't it? All the new groups came on the scene.
Most of the groups used to meet, whether it was TV shows or Top of the Pops, whatever it was, or the famous, more likely the Blue Boar on the M1 at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, we actually went to see them at one of those Granadas. Tooting, whatever it was. They were third on the bill. Tommy Rowe, Chris Montez, and the Beatles. It's half empty, no screens. Yeah. And they were great. I thought they were great. It sounded good, it was exciting, and they had a bit of that humour in their act, and people laughed at it. And we went up to see them afterwards, and we walked up the stairs, and then John was leaning back with his glasses on, and he whipped them off straight away, because they were very similar to the ones I used to wear in those days, and it just made me smile. Someone said later on that he hates people. Sometimes people say, you look like Hank Marvin, and he hates it, and he takes his glasses off, you see. And we had a great chat with them, and was it that night we went to your place?
Yeah, the party. I had a party at my place, yeah. They all came back. You know.
Yeah, and we got the guitars out, a lot of fun. And
we knew they were going to be enormous. I mean, it was obvious they were going to be enormous. Love Me Do, and then Please Please Me.
We were in Abbey Road once, and Paul came in and said, I've got a little tune you might like, can I play it? We said, yeah, and he sat at the piano and he went, down, down, da 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 dee 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 dee, and so on. We said, oh, it's lovely. He said, look, I tell you what, can I put it on a cassette and send it in to you? We said, yeah. Right. That was the end of the story. We never heard from him again. And the next Beatles album came out, and it was on there as a song here, there, and everywhere. Yeah, that was as close as we got to having a Beatles composition for us.
We did a charity show at the Palladium, the famous Palladium in Cliff and the Shads, and Billy Cotton Jr. was there, who was head of the BBC, and asked the Shadows. I mean, we went to Storm, you know, Cliff and the Shadows. We went to Storm, and he asked the Shadows if we would be interested in representing Britain in the Eurovision Song Contest, which was a real big deal in those days. You know, we take the mickey now on stage and everything, but it was a big deal then. And more important, big artists used to appear in it. So, you know, Cliff's done it, as you know, and we've done it. But you know, we could have, even Cliff Richard or the Shadows could have come last, because it is a competition. But it was a big deal, and so we said yes. And ABBA had won the contest the year before, so we went off to Stockholm and sang this song, "Let Me Be the One."
Let me be the one who's loving you tonight. Let me be the one who really holds you tight. I'll even bring along a magic book.
We came second in the contest, but more important, it put the Shadows back in the singles chart, which we hadn't been in the singles chart for, I don't know, 10 years maybe.
Yeah. Bruce actually suggested we play it on stage as a feature for me, and I didn't like the idea at all, because I thought, I don't think it's going to work. So we talked about it. I said, okay, what we'll do, we'll rehearse it, we'll put it in the show. Well, first of all, rehearse it, and if it feels good, we'll put it in the show, and we'll try it out. And if it works in the show, fine. And that's what we did, and it pulled the house down every night. It was fantastic.
It's the only time we've ever had the audience actually shouting us to record it. And that's what happened, wasn't it? I mean, they would, you know, a lot of the nights we were on the road saying, record it. And we'd never had that before. So we did.
So we had this huge hit.
Yeah.
And it was, I think it just took us all by surprise. You know, we didn't really believe it was going to be a hit record. We got this very nice letter from Jean-Michel Jarre, saying he was so thrilled that we'd recorded one of his compositions, because he'd been a big Shads fan. And fun enough, later on, I did a track with him on the Revolutions album. And
you played in Docklands as well.
Played in the Docklands thing with them, yeah.
You play anywhere, this guy.
Do anything. And then I also